Okay, today is June 3rd, 2024, and this is the third class in the Painless Music Theory for Ukes series that we are doing with some of our friends from Bucks and otherwise. Last week, we defined major and minor seconds, and we defined major and minor thirds. We listened to these intervals on GarageBand and on musictheory.net. And we also went up the scale. Now, major and minor seconds is not too much of a difficulty in that the major and minor second correspond to the half step and the whole step, the minor second being the half step and the whole step being the major second. So, that's the same identification that we use for whole steps and half steps in the C major scale and also in all the scales that we do. So, but anyway, we listened to those, and we also identified all the major and minor thirds in the scale. And we also talked about melodic intervals versus harmonic intervals. In other words, melodic intervals are where you've got a melody, so you play one note and then the other note. So like that, as opposed to a harmonic interval where you play the notes together. So that would be harmonic intervals there. Let's see. Let's see how many folks. Oh, we've got 3 folks now. So somebody else joined us. Oh, Randy's hey. Here. Hi, Randy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, all I did was just talk about what we talked about last week. And I guess the question is, how are you folks doing on identifying those intervals, major and minor seconds, major and minor thirds? Randy, have you done some of the musictheory.net?
Well, I'm working my way slowly through, this book, the Music Theory for You. Did you have a session last week, or was it 2 weeks ago?
You're right, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, okay.
The last session is what I meant. Yeah. No, I did not have one last week. 2 weeks ago, the previous session. Did you get into that musictheory.net?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, I would do that, Randy. One of the really valuable things.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Kathy about that also. But one of the really valuable things is recognizing these intervals, and it really does. When you've got a melody that you really like, a lovely melody, then you can see what they've done, how they put that melody together, as opposed to it just sort of being notes and so on. If you say, oh, he went up a major third there and then came down a perfect fourth and, did these things. But you can't do that, and you can't have that enjoyment unless you know those intervals. And so I would try that. And
okay.
If you've got any question, and I'll make this offer to anybody, if anybody's got any question, give me a call.
Sure.
Or email me, and we can get on the horn. In other words, if you have any problem using that musictheory.net, because it's really a very valuable tool. And as I said, you can make it as difficult or as easy as you want to. In other words, if all you want to do is recognize major and minor seconds, you can set it up so all you're hearing is major and minor seconds. If you want to challenge yourself a little more and throw in major and minor thirds, you can do that. And so you distinguish between the two. Okay, let's see. How many folks we got now? Okay, we still got just 3 of you.
And you're one of those.
What's that?
You're one of the 3.
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, hey, look, again, they can watch it later.
Yeah.
I want to give everybody a little review quiz. Okay, so there's going to be 4 questions, but the third question is going to be to recognize some intervals. So now, Randy, again, maybe you don't need that in musictheory.net if you could recognize the intervals. Okay, here's the first question. Write the notes of the C scale just on a piece of paper, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, and then let's say above the C and to the left of the low C, put the letter S, meaning you're starting with the C. Now, what I want you to do is to identify the interval between each of those notes. C and D, is that a whole step or a half step? D and E, E and F, and so on. So write those all in there, and I'll give you a few minutes to do that. This is review. That's question number 1. But it is important, and we're going to be doing a lot more with that in the coming weeks because we're going to be building scales in different keys. And it's really easy to do that if you know where the half steps are and the whole steps in major scales. If you know that, then you're about 3/4 of the way home, because otherwise it just falls out, as you'll see. So that's question number 1. Write the half steps and the whole steps. Okay. Now, this I've already told you what the answer to this is. Hopefully you did that whole step and half step at the top of the list. What I want you to do is go to the bottom of that list of letters and write whether that's, those are all seconds of one kind or another. And I want you to write whether that's a major second or a minor second underneath there. So you're going to start and then use a capital M for major second and a lowercase m for minor second. That's question number 2. Okay, now number 3 is I want you to put numbers down from 1 to 12. I'm going to play 12 intervals. They're either seconds or thirds, but they're either minor thirds or major thirds, minor seconds or major seconds. And I'm going to play them. And I will play them in the way that when I took music theory at Ohio State, this is the way that they did ear training and in ear training tests in that. In other words, first I played the interval melodically, in other words, the separate notes, and then I played the 2 notes together. So, so do you have your numbers down 1 to 12? Okay, here is number 1. Number 2. Number 3.
Hey, Dave, you need to put yourself on mute. You got sound in the background.
I'll ready. Okay, that should do it. Okay, that was number 3. Yes, it was. That was number 3. That was 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. Number 10. Number 11. And finally, number 12.
That's just for me to talk.
Okay.
Say again. Well, okay. Okay, now the last question, and I've already told you the answer to this. What is the difference between a harmonic interval and a melodic interval of the same size? Okay. Okay. Now here are the answers. The first one, we're putting the whole steps and the half steps in. It's start, whole step, half step between C and D, D and E and F. Then whole step, half step between F and G, G and A and B and C, respectively. And So that should have been pretty easy because the whole steps are major seconds and the half steps are minor seconds. So in other words, it's the interval from C to D is major second, D to E is major, E to F is minor. There's only one half step in that. F to G is major, A to B, G to A major, A to B a major second, and then B to C is a minor second. Okay, so that's the other half of that. Okay, now here's the answers. So Kathy, did you get to try the musictheory.net? Did you try that app and test yourself on those intervals? How did you can unmute yourself? How did you do on those intervals? Okay, let's here. Why don't you unmute yourself? Let's talk a little bit. Can you unmute yourself? There you should have a picture of a microphone with a red line through it. Oh, okay, you're unmuted now. Can you so say something? I'm not hearing you. I could hear Randy when he was talking, but say okay, Kathy, okay, you can just answer yes or no. Did you do seconds, major and minor seconds first, and then do major and minor thirds? Did you do them separately, or did you try to do them all together? Separate. I think you're muted again. You're muted again. Yeah. Now you should be up. But I was hearing Randy. Okay. Okay. And did you have any better luck with one of the sets of intervals than the others, the seconds versus the thirds? Oh, did you? Which was okay? Was it the seconds or the thirds that you had better luck with? Seconds. You mean telling between minor and major second? Okay. Okay. Well, the major and minor third is the thing that is distinctive to me is the major third sounds happy. The minor third sounds sad. Okay, and you can always get that feeling in there. Now I'm gonna give you guys a hint because all of the intervals that I've been doing so far have been going up, ascending intervals, as we say. Well, obviously music goes up, but music also comes down. And you also want to be able to recognize the intervals coming down. Well, when I was in music theory, I never had a good way of just instantaneously recognizing the intervals. But what I used to do when we had our tests was I would sing the interval back reversed, inverted. In other words, if the teacher played it down like this, I would go da 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 da. You see, I would sing it to myself because I recognized them easily going up, but going down, I had a little bit more trouble. But if I could mentally just remember the tones and just sing them back to myself. So in other words, and that's a minor third. I mean, to me, that sounds kind of sad. Now, and Randy, did you have any problem? I'll tell you what the answers were to these. Kathy, did you write down all 12? Did you try to identify all 12? Okay, I'll give you the answers. Number 1, major second. Number 2, minor third. 3, major third. 4, minor second. 5, major second. 6, minor second. 7, major third. 8, minor third. 9, major third. 10, major second. 11, major third. 12, minor second. And just so you know that there was no pattern to that. I actually generated that quiz with a random number generator. In other words, there's 1 half step in a minor second, 2 half steps in a major second, 3 half steps in a minor third, 4 half steps in a major third. So what I did was I generated the numbers 1 to 4 in a random fashion, repeating the numbers, and that's what came out. So my phone made up the quiz for you. Okay, now what we never got your sound working, did we, Kathy? Okay. Okay, well, okay, you only missed 4. Well, that's pretty good. That's not bad. How'd you do, Randy? Did you get them all?
I got pretty well. I number 10. I missed that one and
Okay, number 10 was a major second.
yep. Yeah. Okay, I hear it now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wrote down what they were just in case you wanted to hear it again. And
Yeah.
that's the nice thing about that musictheory.net. If you can play that as many times as you want to and listen to it, and listen to it 25 times if you want to, really get it down.
Mhm.
And let's say you miss it. Well, you can play it again and they give you another chance. Obviously, if it's major and minor second, that's all you got, and you missed it, then
Right.
by elimination. But you don't want to guess. But if you've got a whole range of things, and we're going to be learning some new intervals tonight. If you got a whole range of things, then you can listen to it again and try another answer and so on. And then the nice thing about it is when you finally get the right answer, if it's taking you a couple of tries, you can listen to it again and see, now, what was it that I missed about that? How can I recognize that? And as I said, to me, the seconds are dissonant there because they're either right next to each other or one note apart. So, and so on. That's the major and minor seconds. Okay. And if you, they're dissonant, whereas the thirds are not particularly dissonant. They're pretty consonant. So you got or okay. So they sound pretty nice together. Okay, so that's the only one you missed, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, look, I mean, if you've got that down, maybe you won't need the musictheory.net, but we're going to get a little bit more complicated. We're going to add some more intervals, and then we're going to add some chords too. So
Yeah, I suspect that I'll benefit from it because all my life I've relied on my ear to be able to, to say, does that sound right? But with no understanding of what was behind it. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve here, is to finally figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, can you read music? You read music.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. You read music and you play the piano, so you're familiar with the piano in addition to the uke. Do you play any other instruments?
I played the saxophone and the flute in earlier years, and I still play the flute a little bit, but yeah, and most of those, the flute, or I've got it's essentially a little dulcimer, we'll call a strum stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I can pick out tunes on it, and it's mainly, just by understanding, okay, I know where the next note is. I don't know what it is, but I know where it is.
Yeah. Well, again, that, and really a very good way to read music is not necessarily to think of the notes yourself, but think of the intervals when you're reading music and playing music, because that way you've got the melodic flow, and you're not just, because when you read things, you don't think of each letter individually. You think of the pattern of letters and so on.
Yeah.
And a lot of tunes have very familiar patterns. Okay, so tonight, the new things that we're going to do are the following 4 things, or whatever we get done within the hour.
Yeah.
First of all, we're going to skip fourths for temporarily, and we're going to go right to fifths, and we're going to learn and recognize fifths. And here we're talking about the interval of a fifth. We're not talking about booze. So you know, we're not going to start. Okay, now we'll also learn how we use fifths to build chords called triads. In other words, a triad, we'll learn about what a triad is and how to build triads using our primarily thirds and fifths. We don't do too many seconds in beginning triads, so we basically do either major or minor thirds and also fifths to build our triads. So we're going to talk about what triads are, how they sound, and how we build them. Then what we're going to do once we start building triads is we're going to analyze triads up the C major scale, just like we've analyzed half steps and whole steps, just like we analyze seconds up and down the C major scale. We're going to analyze thirds, triads up and down the C major scale. We're going to do fifths first, and then we're going to do triads up and down the C major scale. And if we have time today, we're going to learn about chord inversions, and we'll talk about them. If we don't have time, we'll do that next week. So let's talk about a fifth. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a share screen here, and I'm going to get my list of the letters in the musical alphabet in the C major scale, and let me pull it up here. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Now, you'll remember that to get a second, when you're building an interval, you count number one on the first note of the interval and count up until you get to the number of the interval that you want. So in other words, if you want to build a third on a C, then you start with, here, let me get the pencil working. You start with C, and then you go 1, 2, 3, and a third up from C is E. Okay, and similarly, A to C is a third, G to B is a third, and they're either minor thirds or major thirds. Okay, so similarly, to build a fifth, what you do is, let's start on C, and you'll go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the notes from C to G are a fifth. And here's the sound of the notes from C to G. Now, that is what we refer to as a perfect fifth. You know, in the seconds and thirds, they're major and minor seconds and thirds. And for reasons that we'll learn down the road, fourths and fifths don't use major and minor. They use perfect and not perfect. And we'll get into that. But anyway, this is a perfect fifth. Now, you might recognize this familiar tune. Okay, so the perfect fifth sounds like the beginning of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So here's another perfect fifth. Okay. And the nice thing about fifths is fifths are really easy to analyze, but let's take a look at fifths. Okay, putting our whole steps and half steps in, we have a whole step between C and D, a whole step between D and E, a half step between E and F. Oh, that's a half. That should be a half step. half step, and then a whole step between F and G. Okay, so you see what you have between, I'm going to make that a better W. What you have between, to build a fifth is 3 whole steps and 1 half step. So if you've got 3 whole steps and 1 half step, the interval between those 2 notes is a fifth. Okay, let's put in the rest of our whole steps and half steps. So we've got whole step, half step between E and F, whole step between F and G, between G and A, a whole step between A and B and C is a half step, C and D is a whole step, D and E is a whole step, E and F is a half step. Okay, so we've got them all in there. So you see C and D, between C and G, that perfect fifth has got 3 whole steps and a half step. Now let's look at the fifth generated by D and A. So if we start at D, D to A is a fifth. And we've got 1, 2, 3 whole steps and a half step. So between C and G, we had a perfect fifth, P5, I'll say. Between D and A, we have a perfect fifth. And here's C and G. Here's D and A. Okay, that sounds like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Let's take a look at E and F. You may see where this is going already. If instead of D and A, we go from E to B, E to B, what do we have? A half step between E and F and 3 whole steps. So that also makes a perfect fifth. So here's E to B. So E to B is a perfect fifth. Okay. Continuing now on our journey up the scale, let's look at G to D. G, A, B, C, D. 1, 2 whole steps, half step, and then another. So we have another 3 whole steps and 1 half step. So G to D is a perfect fifth. Okay. So far, they've all been perfect fifths. So we've got A to E. Here's A to E. Okay, whole step between A and B, half step. Okay, and you see there, what do we have? We have 3 whole steps and a half step. So between A and E, we have a perfect fifth. And finally, let's take a look at B to F. Okay, B to F. Okay, so we got a half step between B and C, 2 whole steps between C, D, and E, and another half step. Oh, that doesn't sound like it's going to be a perfect fifth. And let me play that interval between B and F. Oh, that sounds like a star that's kind of falling out of the sky. And that doesn't sound like a very happy star, does it? So here's that. So now all the other intervals had 3 whole steps and 1 half step. This interval has 2 whole steps and 2 half steps. So it's smaller than a perfect fifth. And the name of this is a diminished fifth. So from B to F, it's a diminished fifth. Okay, but you see that all the rest of them are perfect fifths in the scale, from C to G, C, G, D, A, E, B, E to B, G to D, A to E, and so on. They're all perfect fifths except on the seventh note of the scale, that in the major scale, that's a diminished fifth there. Okay, but we'll talk about diminished fifths a little bit later on, and where they're used and how they're used and what the situation is with them. Okay, so any question about fifths? I'm going to stop sharing now. Okay, you have that same situation in all major scales. In all 12 major scales, you have all of the fifths in the scale are perfect fifths, except the one on the seventh note of the scale, the seventh degree of the scale. So that makes it pretty easy. Now, any questions so far? Perfect fifth, that's just another interval. And before we're done, we'll learn all the intervals. We'll talk about fourths, we'll talk about sixths and sevenths and ninths and 11ths and 13ths and that type of thing. But right now, one step at a time, okay? Kathy, you still there? Oh, her camera's off too. Okay, well, again, we started out with just Kathy. So Randy, if I don't know if Dave is still, I've got it on gallery, but all I see you. So hey, if it's a private lesson, that's fine with me. I think other people can benefit from our conversations. And I suppose you don't have to mute yourself, so we can have dialogue. Okay. Any question? Fifths are pretty easy. Twinkle,
Yeah,
twinkle.
that makes sense. That one is a nice, easy one.
Yes. Okay. Now let's talk about triad. As the name. Hello.
I'm here, Allan, but I can't hear a word. I can't hear anything that you play.
Okay.
So there's something wrong with.
Oh, okay. Well, my suggestion would be give me a call sometime, or we can FaceTime or something like that, and see if we can figure out your problem. I'm clueless as to what your problem. I mean, you can't hear.
Yeah. No, I can't hear any of that.
Okay.
So go ahead. I'll just listen along.
Okay. No, we're talking about triads. As the name suggests, triads are chords, but they're special kind of chords. They've got 3 notes in the chord. Okay. And now obviously in the ukulele, we have 4 strings, and we play a lot of pure chords on the ukulele. So, but we're for a lot of those chords, and then unless they're like 6th or 7th or something like that, we're really only playing 3 different notes. Now, it may be that some of the notes are repeated. If you've got reentrant tuning, your G string will be an octave higher than on my uke, and so you'll have maybe 2 of those G's in the chord or something like that. But you're really only playing 3 different notes if you're playing a triad. And we're going to talk about triads in the key of C, and I'm going to go back to that list of the letters that we were working on when we were talking about fifths. So I'm going to pull them up, and we're going to talk about building triads and what kind of triads you have in the major scale. Let's see. Share screen. Okay. Okay, here's our C major scale again. So triads are thirds on top of thirds when they're in root position. So in other words, if you start with a C note, building a triad would be playing the C. Let me get that. Okay, playing the C, playing the E, and playing the G. And that would be a triad. Okay, and that is a C chord. And if you notice on the bottom of that C chord, and when the note, when it's the triad is in thirds like this, it's all thirds. The bottom note is the root of the chord, and that chord is said to be in root position. And we'll talk about chord inversions later on, because chord inversions are very interesting, especially for us ukulele players. And they also really make a lot of flavor in your music, and we'll talk about them either later today or next week. But anyway, this is a C major chord, C, E, G, in root position. And notice that from C to E is a major third. And from E to G is a minor third. So if you've got a triad in root position and you've got a major third on the bottom, it's a major triad. Okay, if you've got a minor third on top. So major third on the bottom, and here's the sound of a major, the C major triad. So the C chord, the C triad, is major. Now let's take a look at D. The triad built on D. Okay, that would be a D, a D, an F, and an A. Okay, now between D and F, that's a minor third. It's a whole step between D and E, but it's only a half step between E and F. So this is a minor third. And from F to A, that's a major third. You've got two whole steps there. So in the D chord, the D triad in the key of C, that's a minor triad because the minor third is on the bottom. So D is minor. Let's take a look at E. We can go all the way up the scale. So that would be E, G, B. So E to G, minor third. G to B, major third. So that makes the E chord a minor chord because the bottom third is a minor third in the E minor chord. And we can go all the way up the scale, and we're going to continue to do this. F, F, A, C, F to A, major third. A to C, minor third. So there, the major third is on the bottom. So F is a major chord in the key of C. G, let's take a look at that. Okay. G, B, D, G to B, major third, B to D, minor third. Major third on the bottom. So we have G is a major chord. The G triad is major. Let's look at A. Okay, A, C, E, minor third on the bottom. Major third, C to E is a major third on top. So the A is a minor chord. Okay, and that leaves B. Now, as you remember, the fifth, the B to F was the only interval, the only fifth in the scale that was not a perfect fifth. That was a diminished fifth. So let's take a look at the chord, the triad that we build on B. B, D, F. B to D, minor third. D to F, minor third. That two minor thirds build a diminished triad. So just like B had a diminished fifth, and that was the only fifth in the scale, in the major scale, that was a diminished fifth. All the rest of them were perfect fifths. In this case, the seventh, the triad that you build on the seventh note of the scale is a diminished triad in a major scale. And again, we'll talk about how we use diminished triads, and I know sometimes you see them popping up in your music. But anyway, so just to summarize, the major chords in the C major scale are the C chord, the F chord, and the G chord. The minor chords are the D chord, the E chord, and the A chord. So that's 6. And then the seventh note of the scale is B, and that's the diminished. So there's C, F, and G major, D, E, and A minor, B is diminished. Okay, and you know that when you play chords up the scale on your ukulele, you play a major C, a D minor, an E minor, an F major, a G major, an A minor, and then the B is a diminished chord. Okay, but maybe you didn't realize that that's the pattern for all major scales. But we can take a look. I'm gonna show you another diagram from the book. Okay. Now you may remember this from last week, or maybe even I guess it would be last week. Oh wait, I'm pushing the wrong button. Oh, I'm glad that I didn't do that. Okay, you may remember this. What we analyzed last week, we just like we went through fifths and triads in the C major scale. Last week we looked at thirds in the C major scale, and notice that the minor, the C, the F, and the G thirds in the C major scale are major chords, and the D, the E, and the A are minor chords, minor thirds, and the third on B is also a minor third. Well, when you make those into triads with those as the bottom intervals, what you get is all the same chord as the thirds that you played, except for B. And in the case of the B triad, that's a B diminished instead of a B minor. But you see, those correspond very nicely. And so if you know your thirds, then basically you know your chords, and all you have to do is remember remember that the seventh chord of the scale. And again, we'll be talking about other scales. We've been talking about C a lot because on the piano it's pretty easy, but you know, it doesn't have the sharps and flats to make things more difficult. But we'll get into those and see how the same principles that we're applying to the C scale and the intervals and the harmonic intervals and harmonies and triads and so on are applicable in the other keys also. It's just that you have more sharps and flats that are scattered around. Okay. Any questions, Randy? Any questions?
No, that's, you know, that's straightforward. I'll need to do some work on the, you know, the diminished, but the others all make sense.
Well, the thing is that listening to you go up the scale, I'm starting with the C chord, major, D is minor, E is minor, F is major, G is major, A is minor, and B is diminished. But we'll talk about how you use the diminished and how you resolve the diminished and the diminished fifth and so on. That's all really interesting and really fun. Okay, now we've got a few minutes left, and so we talked about the triads and the C scale. And as I said, in the coming weeks, we'll be going into other scales and talking about how the principles that we are talking about in the building of the triads is the same principles in the other keys, and it's the same pattern of major and minor and diminished in the other keys, with going from the first chord up to the seventh or eighth chord, but obviously they have different letter names because we're talking about different keys. Now, what I want to talk about is chord inversions. We said that if you have all thirds in your chord, and you had a triad and it's all thirds, the note at the bottom was the root, and that chord was said to be in root position. But root position is really not very much fun. If you know the song "Let It Be," I'm going to play "Let It Be" on the piano using all those chords in root position, and see how boring and mundane you think it is. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. That's pretty horrible, isn't it? I really think it is. And you don't play that way, and you wouldn't want to play that way. But the funny thing is that even if you do that on the uke, is just as horrible and boring and mundane as if you do it on the piano. So when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary waits for me, comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Okay, that's just as horrible on the ukulele, I think, having all those chords in root position as it is on the piano. Now, let's see what happens if you switch some of the notes in the chords so the chords are not always in root position. So I'm going to do the same progression. So when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Okay, isn't that nice? All that is using inversions of chords. So I start out with the C chord in root position. Then the G chord, what would the notes of the G chord be? It would be G, B, D, correct? Here, I'll write them. The notes of the G chord would be G, B, D. So if I played them all in root position, so when I find myself in times of trouble, okay. But if I play it in the first inversion, in other words, what I'm doing is I'm taking the G, and instead of playing it down there, I'm moving the G up here, and the B is in the bass. So, and when I find myself in times of trouble, okay, now there, I'm going to the A minor chord, and the A minor chord is in root position. So it's A, C, E in root position. Mother Mary. Okay, then comes to me the F chord. The notes in the F chord are F, A, C. But what I'm going to do is take the F and put it up at the top of the chord instead of at the bottom of the chord. So when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. And then whisper, speaking words, and that is the C chord right there. The notes of the C chord are C, E, G, but I am taking the C and the E and moving them up to the top of the chord. So G, C, E. Let's see, where were we? When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. C, speaking words. Now that is the second inversion. In other words, I've taken two notes and put them up at the top of the chord. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Now that's, so the G chord is in root position, and the F chord is in root position. But when I end the song, I'm not taking the C chord down to the root position. I've got an inversion of the C chord. So the way that comes out on the uke is also really very nice. So when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And so just by default, we usually wind up, for the most part, playing most of our chords in inversions and not in the root position. And you get a very nice melodic line by doing that. Now, sometimes you may want to have the root of the chord, and when we get further in the course, we'll talk about how to build, like you have an F chord right there, you've got an F chord right there, and you've got an F chord right there. In other words, different places to play the same chord if you want to do like a melody or something along that line. But anyway, that is inversions of chords, and we'll do a little bit more with that next week. But you see what a nice effect you get when you use appropriate inversions of chords, rather than just playing everything in root position. That's kind of mundane and boring and not really a lot of fun. And fortunately, with the uke, when we're playing up in the first position of the uke up here, we wind up with a lot of inversions, because now again, I have straight tuning, so I have if you have re-entrant tuning, you do even more inversions, because sometimes you just inadvertently do an inversion because you've got the high G chord, G note here. Well, any questions before we depart, Randy?
No, I've got some work to do. I'm going to spend some time now. Is it next week or 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
today's the 3rd, so it'll probably be like 17th.
Yeah.
Alan, where would I find the recorded lessons that you've done before?
Okay, they're on YouTube, and there's a link to them on the Bucks Ohio Facebook page. There's link to them, but you can also go into YouTube, put my name in with 2 L's, Allan Roth, and then ukulele theory, and it'll pop up, so you can find them there. And maybe you'll be able to hear. You haven't heard any of the recordings, then, Dave, right?
So yeah, I'll try. Maybe they'll turn up on the recorded
Yeah,
versions.
yeah. Let me know if you can hear what the playing on those versions. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good seeing all you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alan, it might be a good idea to go ahead and for each time after you upload the recording to go ahead and put a new link on the Bucks page.
I think doesn't I think John does that.
Does he? Okay, I hadn't noticed.
It's the Bucks members page.
Okay. Maybe that's I was looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, and they're all up there. As a matter of fact, I have when I open one, the others are right in line there. And there's a lot of people that teach ukulele theory, but we're going slower, and I think we're building it step by step. And I'm trying to really apply it to the uke, and we'll be doing more with the uke as far as analyzing chords and that in upcoming lessons, and building chords and showing how we make the chords. Okay, well, it's 8 o'clock, so all's well. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Alan.
Bye, Dave. Bye, Randy.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.